All right.
All right. Did I talk enough? I'm going to talk now.
That's a good...
Gonna talk. Radio Chad.
Welcome to NOCLIP. I'm Chad Ruthermond.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Psychonauts. Psychonauts was released in 2005 on the PC, PS2, and Xbox, and is a 3D platformer. And I think, more importantly, at least for my experience, it's the game that sort of put like both Double Fine and Tim Schafer on the map for me, because I did not grow up playing like Monkey Island and those kind of like LucasArts adventure games that the Double Fine team was sort of known for before they started their own company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't have any real exposure to them as a developer until like just several years ago. But I was aware of this game. I feel like this game came out around the time when I watched G4 a lot, and I feel like they covered the crap out of this game.
That's very possible. I feel like Double Fine's like hot streak period was in this era of like the mid 2000s because they had this, and I know Brutal Legend got good coverage as well. And I think all that's pretty valid. This is from that time period. Psychonauts is the only one that I like consistently enjoyed. Like Brutal Legend started as a cool game and then turned into a strategy game. And if you've seen our catalog at all, you're probably aware I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, that was definitely disappointing. I remember when you told me that. Because I was interested in checking that one out and then was not.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, but no, I think I played this for the first time. I played like the first half of it like right before we started the podcast, and then ended up not finishing it because podcast.
Right.
And just came back to it for this. And I have to say, I feel like it's definitely like one of the most underrated games of its era.
Possibly. I mean, I would venture to say that it is more overlooked than it is underrated.
Fair enough.
I think that it was well received by the people who did play it, but it still sort of falls into that middle category of like games that people generally knew about, but not a whole lot of them played it, like Okami or something.
Yeah, and I think partially that has to do with, like, I know in my case, I didn't even know this had a PS2 release. Like, I always thought this was an Xbox exclusive game until you told me you had a PS2 copy. Because I could have swore I just remembered this, like, being an Xbox thing. And was sad that I couldn't play it as a kid. Because I totally would have at the time.
Its marketing is very green. So that might have played into it, like Blink's the Time Sweeper.
Yeah, I think it launched on Xbox like a month before the PS2 or something.
It's possible. I didn't look that up because I didn't look shit up because you've been writing all the information down.
Yeah. I think it was like a couple month difference or something.
Yeah, I had it on PS2 and didn't know that it existed on other things. I'm not even 100% certain how or why I own the game, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it's been, for a long time, it has been on my list of sort of like favorite all-time games. And because of that, because the last time I played it was in like 2010, and I played it when it came out on PC. Or I guess not when it came out, but when I got it on PC. And I enjoyed it again. I saw it like another time. This time through the game was the fourth. And I gotta say, maybe this game is more of a nostalgic thing than it is. I think that I would reconsider as like objective quality where this actually lands as far as games that I like.
Yeah, I think it starts out really strong and has like a good like core to it, but it ends up kind of being a mixed bag as it goes on.
Yeah, we'll have to get into certain certain elephants. We'll have to get into certain elements of that sort of like as they come up. But I think the first thing that I do to say is like this game its eyes are bigger than its stomach to some extent. I think that the game has a lot of really good ideas, and I still enjoy the hell out of it, but I do feel like it's reaching for something, and the technology or the experience of the team, something wasn't there. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Like, if people waited for the perfect moment to release everything that they come up with, we wouldn't have anything good ever. uh, and that is... So I commend it, and the fact that it came out as early as it did almost makes it feel a little bit ahead of its time. But there's a technical element to this game that feels lacking.
Now, I would agree with that, and it's kind of hard to put your finger on exactly one thing, but
other than the sides of your temple,
yeah,
when you're doing a sweet mental trick.
But no, I feel like, yeah, like as I said, there's a strong core there. I think it starts out feeling like this super tight, cohesive thing, and it just doesn't quite maintain that throughout. And it's in like a couple different areas, you know. But we can get more into those specifics as we go along, I think. One thing I wanted to that stood out to me, like right off the bat, was I feel like the summer camp is a surprisingly great fit for like a platformer hub world. Like, it kind of reminded me of like Mario Sunshine, where like the hub world is supposed to, in like a 3D platformer, is supposed to be like the more relaxed in between area, and setting it like here in the case of like a laid back summer camp, or like, you know, like on a vacation island like in Sunshine, it just like a surprisingly like laid back nice fit.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I think that their utilization of the hub world starts, as you said, about a lot of things in the game, starts really strong, and then over time becomes more inconvenient. Like the overworld and the fact that there's lots of stuff hidden there, as well as just like your utility things, I think are all very good and important. I like that it's all there. But then the later you get into the game, the more of a hassle it is to go back, because you got to like go talk to the fish, go across the lake, go back to the thing, and it's like, I just needed to get some dream fluffs. Like,
yeah, it's faster to just use the bacon
and extract back to Calder's lab.
The bat lab, and then fast travel.
The bat lab.
The bat lab. But yeah, that was one of my the more disappointing things about the game to me, was once you get across to the asylum, you basically aren't incentivized to engage with the hub at all anymore.
Right. The hub becomes a lot more linear. It's like a level select at that point. Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And also the summer camp setting. I mean, summer camp setting is important to this game for a lot of reasons. But one of my personal favorites is the fact that it gave them an excuse to write all of these minor characters. And all of them sort of have like a plot through line that goes on in between them that is entertaining in its own right, that happens in just these like little vignettes. And the writing is, I think, unsurprisingly the strongest element of this game, with the possible exception of Levitation, the power. It's like, I don't know, it's good that they were able to get more scenes in the camp because of the setting.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the writing and the kind of like the general concept and theming are the best parts. It's something that I think Double Fine is really good at. Things really come together well. I talked about this on a couple of episodes now. I think the one that's coming to mind is like Katamari, where everything just feels really cohesive, like on that base level, where the idea of like being a psychic and then going into other people's minds, and those being the levels, in like the setting of the camp, and like the idea of the Psychonauts, and you know, all that stuff is really well thought out and fits the genre of game really well. And all of this just kind of sounds like a checklist of like good game design things, but like it's surprisingly rare that it all comes together like in a way, like in a this cohesive of a way. It's like this charming.
Yeah, I think cohesion is a really good word to use for it because, like, I don't remember if this was just like private conversation or if this actually happened on the podcast. But we were talking about Luigi's Mansion when it got announced, and I remember a concern that you had about it being set in a hotel for the third game, where it's like, is this going to be just levels, or is it going to be like a cool hub like the mansion in the first game? And like that's like a concern in a platformer. Like, you want a level of cohesion so it doesn't feel like you're going just node to node on a map. It's one of the reasons that like the 2D Mario games that they've released since the SNES era have not stood out in comparison to the 3D ones, because there's a lack of like wholeness to them. There's like, it's too disparate, it's separated, and it feels like individual challenges.
Yeah, and that's something that's always been really important to me, as being someone who is a #90s kid. Mario 64 is one of like the earlier gaming like memories for me, and the one of the biggest advantages that had was the hub and how it made it feel like an adventure and less like levels.
Right.
And I think this has kind of helped me flesh out that idea that we were getting at earlier, where I think the first half of the game leans into a lot of that stuff. It kind of pushes into that, what was new in like being refined in game design at the time, like that more cohesive experience and less gamey stuff, for lack of a better word. And those aspirations kind of like fall off as it goes along and it becomes more linear. And I think that's kind of where like you feel the divide.
Yeah. And this did come out during sort of like a golden age of this kind of design as well. Especially on the PS2. Like, when I was playing this game, it was in direct relief with games like Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter, which also do Jak way more so than Ratchet and Clank, but did these like whole hubs and worlds. And even though that game is more linear, and you do still go between like environments, it's all sort of conceptualized as a big world. And then they go fucking ape shit in the sequels and make it like an open world game with guns. But we'll talk about other Jak games eventually. In Psychonauts, though, it's consistent throughout, but the design of the hub is not.
Yeah.
And while some of your earliest memories of the genre come from Mario 64, mine do not, but they do, however, come from Banjo-Kazooie, which this also shares a familial bond with by being basically a collectathon. It's not necessary to do the collecting in this game, with some exception. Like, you have to at least reach rank 20, which should happen if you sneeze at the controller. But like, to actually complete the game, you don't need to go out of your way. But it's,
with one notable exception.
I guess
you have to get 800 arrowheads.
This is true, to get the cobweb duster.
Yep.
That's not too time consuming with the dowsing rod, though.
Yeah, it's just that was a point of friction for me, because I was enjoying exploring the camp and felt like I was like regularly looking for and picking up arrowheads. And by the time I got to that section, I only had like 250.
Right.
And you have to like halt everything, go back to the camp, get the dowsing rod, and run around for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Collecting the necessary arrowheads to progress. That felt pretty clunky to me.
Yeah, I will give you all the slack in the world for that, because it's a bad choice, I think. The economy of the camp is fucked up, and which is probably was not real high on their priority list, I assume. But like, in the ideal world, the dowsing rod item would have been put into a garbage can, and they would have reduced the cost of the cobweb duster to like 150.
Yeah, I feel like they could have even kept it, but like actually given it to you as like a mandatory item so that you would have been encouraged to like use it and have been using it enough to at least be close.
I suppose, yeah.
Or you could just get rid of it and lower the cost. That's another option. But like if they really wanted to have it, I still think it could have been balanced so that it wouldn't be so far skewed, like, you know, like a difference of like 600 arrowheads.
My main concern is with I haven't mashed a single button on a controller in such a long time that those muscles have atrophied and died. Mm-hmm. And when I was trying to do the arrowhead mashing thing, I like got a cramp in my forearm, which has never happened to me before. So it's either a symptom of me growing old or the tapping thing died out as a trend in gaming, and I just never didn't develop those same weird muscles. But yeah, that's really the big thing. If they had made the minigame different, like rather than just mashing,
different,
because it ends up being it's too much of one thing, and that applies to both pressing one button and also getting a bunch of arrowheads in the middle of the game, just halting your progress, like you said.
And it's like, it's not fun, and it's the sort of thing that you're going to end up just like looking up a guide for or something, you know, like it's just, not very well considered.
Well, I don't think that, I mean, no shade if you looked up a guide.
Oh, yeah, it's so hard to actually find the arrowheads with the dowsing rod.
You just walk around.
But, like, it's so fidget. It's like, you have to be in, like, the pixel-perfect spot for the thing to charge all the way up. So you can be, like, walking around a spot, having it go up most of the way, but not all the way,
right?
And like having to like find that exact spot. Like you can waste a lot of time with that.
This is why you didn't get forearm cramps. You can be pretty far away if you mash fast enough. Like the amount that you mash influences how far up, and like depending on where you are, the harder it is to get it to go up.
Okay. See, to me, it felt like you had to be in like the spot where it was to get it.
You do if you don't want to injure yourself and your body.
Well, either way, then that's not signaled well enough.
No, it really isn't. I think I may have just remembered it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Before we got off on that whole thing, we were talking about sort of how the game doesn't force you to collect stuff, but it is enticing a lot of the time. Particularly, at least for me, was the figments. The fact that you could like, that you would just like catch one and be like, I can just like run over there and get that. And before you know it, you're like, how did I get this far away from the original path?
Yeah, I feel kind of the opposite about the figments. There's so many of them, and the big thing is that they're two-dimensional. So if you're viewing them from the side, you cannot see them.
True.
So it can be insanely difficult to collect them all.
Yeah, I think the only level in this particular playthrough that I got all the figments in was in the Milkman Conspiracy, which I felt like it was just sort of like it's very simple because there isn't a lot of like hidden space.
That one's more compact. Yeah. But like they do have the classic platformer collectible where they're like they make a nice sound effect.
Yeah.
They're colorful. They're satisfying to collect. But like,
you see that bar go up on the side? Oh, like, it's very good.
For me, it would be like I'd go through the level trying to collect as many as I can while I go along. Then I'd hit up the level again later. I'd come back to it and try and sweep everything up, and I'd be missing like 5 to 10, and then be like, well, that's it. Like I'm not putting in forth any more effort than that. That's just kind of how I engage with the figments.
Yeah, I mean, mechanically speaking, like the max level that you would need to get to have everything, which is, once again, not at all necessary to finish the game, is 95, which you can get to, I want to say, like, reasonably easily missing several figments in every level. But it isn't necessarily about the compulsion. I think that actually collecting all the figments is a big detriment to your experience with the game.
Yeah.
There are a couple of levels where it's just like fucking impossible. The dance party, for one, is really hard because of that stupid race, and you have to like go through it like 8 times to get the all the figments in it. Anything that has like a rail grindy thing has the same problem. Not to mention ones where they're just legitimately kind of hard to find.
Right. I found the mental baggage or emotional baggage and the mental Jesus. There's
That's right.
so many things.
Yeah, it's emotional baggage,
emotional
mental cobwebs.
baggage, and the memory vaults
Yeah.
to be the much more enticing collectibles.
True. Well, because they make noise and move around. Like,
yeah, but they actually the the emotional baggage is just like kind of cute in a cartoony way, and they're crying, and you want to rescue them. But the memory vaults actually give you like backstory on the characters, which I think is super interesting and a good way to like motivate you to find them.
Yeah, and they give you a lot of things that the game would not outright spell out, because they give like a backstory that isn't directly related to the events of the game. Whereas like you have one memory vault that always is directly related to the events of the game, and then you have a second one that is not. That's more like the background information on the characters and their actual like profiles. And that is very good. I also do want to shout out that getting all the emotional baggage unlocks the primal memories, which are slideshows that show like concept art. And this is a thing that's like not gone from games. Like this still gets put into things. But whenever I do notice it, I do want to shout it out because it's such a good thing. Because I don't know, shit like that is what made me interested in sort of like the design process in the first place. So
yeah,
I'm glad that they're in there that you can look and see like how the characters actually evolved over time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're that interested that you're gonna collect everything, odds are you're interested in that.
True.
So it's like a good thing to put in as a reward.
Yeah. I don't know if I have anything else on collectibles. I don't think there's anything else to say on collectibles.
I guess to bounce off of that with my levitation ball, I actually found like the core mechanics of this like they felt like they held up surprisingly well. Like on a base level, I think it feels really good to like control, and even like all the little merit badge abilities felt like fairly engaging. You don't use them a ton, but like I still felt like they all felt pretty good to use.
Yeah. I think the game likes to do a thing where it'll introduce like an ability and you use it in that level, and then you move on and go back to like your core abilities, but it likes to sort of throw in, be like, hey, use this ability here. And I think sometimes it ends up working out really well, with things like in the final level, you can use invisibility to dodge like the attacks from your weird dad. And I think that's a good touch because it's just like a thing you can do. But then like, I don't want to talk about the Milkman conspiracy like excessively because that level already gets enough press. But that the boss battle that happens in the middle of that level and again at the end of that level, the fact that they have a line of dialogue if you die to it that just literally explains word for word what you have to do because it is so unintuitive. But they want you to like crack the thing in half and then throw a bomb in it. And the telekinesis thing, like I hadn't used for a million years and wasn't even thinking about it, and it was not clear.
Yeah, I feel similarly, and that was definitely a great example of when it doesn't work. But to me, for the most part, I really liked that about the game, that it gave you a tool belt, and then I think I feel like it wasn't like a perfect balance or anything, but like a pretty good balance of like you never know which thing you might need to use when, and you'd often forget about certain abilities and be like, oh yeah, I've had this all along.
Right.
And like that can be like an enjoyable process to figure out, but yeah, sometimes it leads to too much frustration because I know that fucked with me too, that boss fight.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to the boss fights because I think that they are universally pretty atrocious. But Yeah, that was really going to just be my one example of it not. It's not the only example, but it is like the one that is the standout for me. I think generally speaking, they do a really good job with the tools. The only issue, and this isn't really the game's fault, is it has kind of Ocarina of Time syndrome, where because you can only equip 3 at a time, you have to keep bringing up the menu and then change the thing and then change the thing back and then change it back and back and back and back. Especially since if you're like any sane individual, you always have levitation on one of them.
Oh yeah,
probably R2.
Yeah, I didn't even realize you could change it.
You can replace it with something else.
Yeah,
but...
I for some reason thought you could only change the other 2 spots and thought levitation was locked in.
Yeah, it might as well be.
Why would you change it? Like,
there's like no reason to. Yeah. It's the best.
It's
thing.
Like it becomes like part of your jump. Like you double jump and then you use it to float. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't do that all the time.
Yeah, it's bizarre to think of. So aside from levitation, what did you think about their use of abilities in the game? Because I feel like we had kind of a conversation like this when we talked about Metroid Prime and how it felt like some of the pickups in that game were a little half-baked. And I do kind of feel that way about this as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's a kind of thing it's going to vary a lot person to person. Because, like, early on, I just kind of used the first couple they gave to me. Like, just the Psy Blast, like your basic shooty projectile.
Right.
And the telekinesis and the levitation jump. And slowly over the course of the game, I came to realize that pyrokinesis is great.
It is, yeah.
Because it allows you to, like, just set things on fire from a distance, which, because sometimes the shooting can be kind of finicky. So, like, that's a good backup to do, like, a pretty decent amount of damage. But, no, I would agree. A lot of them feel like they don't accomplish a unique enough thing that they don't really feel necessary, so there's a lot of them that you can ignore.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. I think my biggest culprit for this, I think, is clairvoyance.
Yeah,
because it seems like the kind of thing that could be replaced with a held item, like the cobweb duster is.
Lens of truth.
Yeah, exactly like the lens of truth, because it's used so infrequently, and it is used more often to deliver jokes than it is to actually progress in the game. I think because it's the thing that is most disconnected from running and jumping, doing platformer things.
Yeah. It comes up so infrequently that it almost feels like it should. Like, if you went out of your way to use it a bunch, like, you might unlock some kind of secret thing with it.
Right.
You know, like, you'd go back to the camp and use it on a specific person to reveal blank thing that would lead to blank thing. You know, like, you could almost imagine it would be a good way to hide Easter eggs and things.
Yeah. And, I mean, that very well might be in the game. I don't actually know. As many times as I've played this game, I've not really gotten that in depth with it. But it is possible, because currently a lot of the time you just sort of, like, you get the, like, what do they think of Raz thing.
Like, I don't think you ever have to use it outside of Milkman. And I don't think I ever did.
You are probably right. Yeah. I do not remember, though.
Because in that level, you had to have an item to go into each, like, special area that the, like, government agents were in. And in my mind, I had linked that with the clairvoyance power and was thinking that I needed to be holding the corresponding item to see through the eyes.
Right.
Is that how it works?
You see through the eyes.
Okay, so then how does that work not in that level?
I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, so it works with certain handheld items, it says, but you can also just use it on people and see through their eyes.
Okay.
It like is supposed to link with things. So you hold the crow feather and you can see through the eyes of the crow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's specific for those enemies and also that bird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that applies to other things, but the only time that I remember actually having to use it to do something, because you don't actually even have to do the crow thing if you know how to solve the puzzle, aka go real fast and jump,
Mm-hmm.
is when the guy comes out to unlock the door.
Yeah.
And other than that, as far as I know, it's never required to progress. So I guess my question stands. Why is it a power?
Yeah.
It just seems a little bit...
It's like something that's dropped.
Yeah. And, I mean, maybe it was just to preserve the diamond shape on the backpack. I don't know.
Yeah, it just seems like the kind of thing that they couldn't come up with more than one level's worth of things to use it for.
Right. It just seems very interesting, because their whole games, like Watch Dogs is kind of like the clairvoyance power, but for every living person on the planet.
Yeah, it seems like something they came up with like late stage of development.
Right. Yeah, other than that, I think they did a pretty decent job. Telekinesis is impossible to control. It's just like a crapshoot whether or not I'm going to actually... So? It might be me.
Yeah, I didn't think it was hard to use.
Yeah, I could not get it to do what I wanted ever. Like, I felt like it took 30 minutes for the little arrow to come out. But I don't know. That irritated me a lot, like that power does.
Yeah.
Which I think adds to the difficulty of that final boss as well, because you have to throw the juggling things at his knees. They're just like jacks in the game. I don't know what they really are.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just not ideal for me. Didn't like that one very much. But I think otherwise, everything had a use.
Yeah, it does. I think a lot better than other games at the time. Like incorporating that many mechanics, I think most of them go over well. Which I think is no small feat.
Yeah, no, commendable.
Yeah.
I think we're too amused by like...
We'll give Tim Schafer his game design merit badge.
Man, do people still hate Tim Schafer?
Did they ever?
Oh yeah, there was like
I'm not very plugged into that, so...
That's good.
I would have to imagine that perception of him is what I think the perception of Double Fine is in general, where they have their niche audience and everyone else is like, eh. That's how I would imagine people think of Tim Schafer.
Well, Double Fine did just have like a whole sort of like studio meltdown, so there's that, but like... So that represents Tim Schafer's scraggly beard. But no, there was like a whole... I don't want to reiterate it because I don't want to like bring up the whole thing again. But the important thing to note is that his name is an anagram of Mr. Shithead, which is... which is the best thing that came out of it, even though I don't agree. I want to branch off a little bit from that and talk about the writing of the game and all that stuff. But I feel like that deserves to be separated a little bit.
I agree.
Were there particular... I mean, I guess we just say like levels that you liked. Like, what were your top and bottom?
I like how the game's broken up into tutorial and later levels. Like, you got the initial 3 with the instructors at the camp. Then you have the fish, Lisa or Linda or whatever. Linda, which is like a kind of a transitionary thing. And then you have the asylum. And I think I fall in line with everyone else in thinking that the asylum levels are the best ones.
Yeah.
I really like Gloria's Theater. I think that one's really creative. I like Black Velvetopia a lot, and Milkman. Those are definitely the top 3. I think Waterloo World, while I think that one's fine, is maybe a little bit too open.
Yeah.
I think the strength of the levels is that they're like smaller, more densely packed areas, and that one tries to be a little bit bigger. which I don't think works quite as well. But
yeah, it's bigger and it also lets you change size in it, which makes it like not quite 3 times bigger, but like 1.5 times because like the board gets smaller as you get bigger. So
yeah, and Linda's level gets a shout out for being the funniest.
Yeah, the Lungfish Opolis.
Yeah, Lungfish Opolis.
Yeah, is very, very funny. And I also, of all the boss fights, that one might be my favorite one. Even though, like, I mean that
elaborate combination.
Yeah. Which gets like a little bit like it gets repeated, but that's a whole thing that I think they, generally speaking, should have either reduced the frequency with which NPCs speak or written a lot more dialogue, because you hear the same stuff over and over again. I think it works in that fight in a way that it doesn't in other places.
It's definitely really funny.
Yeah. But that whole level is really just like, I hate repeating jokes for the podcast, but the whole bit with the orphanage like kills me every time that I hear it. Wait, that wasn't the orphanage. Just, I don't know. Very good, very funny. I even like the lead up where you actually do the platforming while they're pushing the bubble. Yeah, is cool.
It's funny because you don't really have any control over it. You just kind of walk around and everything just kind of falls to pieces around you, and there's all these like horrible consequences to all the lungfish people. That keep being sprung on you like that, and it's just a really funny setup.
Yeah, and I do want to like. I mean, I guess if we want to, I think Lungfishopolis, I think Black Velvetopia, and I think Milkman are probably my favorites. I do also really enjoy the dance party thing because the introduction of Levitation, they give you like a really cool kind of playground to work with it in, and I like all of that a whole lot. But yeah, the one thing that I also wanted to mention about the Lungfish level before we actually like the Linda Interstitial part where she pushes the bubble and shit. Like, I love that part as it moves through the water. They have stuff just like things that are suspended in the water just like collapse when the air bubble goes over it.
Yeah,
and it's like such a good. Like, I couldn't stop watching that happen because it was something that they didn't need to do. And I'm really happy that they did, because it is just this, like, really, like, immediate sort of, like, comical scenario that they're playing with. And I just like that a lot.
It definitely feels like playing with the technology at the time. Like, they're like, we can do this, so let's do that. It would be funny.
Yeah, let's drop a fish on him.
Yeah. Now, that is a really cool idea for a fight.
Mm-hmm. And I like anything that, in a platformer, 99% of the time, I'm going to like your fight better if it involves platforming. Yeah. Like, the second phase of the final boss is kind of horseshit, at least in my opinion, but we'll come back to that. Yeah. After the break?
Yeah, I think so. I've got more things to talk about, but I feel like they definitely should go after the break.
All right, after the break. Welcome back. So when we left, we kind of were talking about some bosses and some endgame stuff, and leading into the mechanics of that. You asked if I had anything I wanted to start with. I kind of do, which is, were there really any bosses that you found to be an enjoyable test? Because I felt like most of them sort of were the same, but I also kind of have this issue with a lot of platform game bosses, so
no, I felt similarly. They felt like the most half-baked element of the game. I think the standout one is Linda, the lungfish, and the ones we called out, and the in disguise
Oleander,
whatever his superhero name was, I don't remember.
They say it like 1,000 times in the level. Yep. But I just do not remember.
But yeah, those are the two that were probably the most enjoyable. Anything else is just like fine if it's not, tedious. Like in Black Velvetopia, like the wrestler fights were okay, but you had to do it 4 times, so it becomes
Yeah.
But yeah, it like the only platformers I can think of that have had bosses that I really enjoyed is probably Mario Galaxy. I just feel like it's a hard thing to do when your game's focused on running and jumping as the engagement to also include combat mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be difficult to like make a boss that revolves around platforming. So it's like kind of a tight spot if you want to include bosses in your platformer.
Yeah, and the more complicated your platforming is, the harder it is to also include a deep combat system, because like I want to call out things like Ratchet and Clank, which had good bosses but at the same time also was way more focused around combat. Like Ratchet and Clank is almost a third person shooter as much as, if not more than, it is a platformer.
Yeah, it's all about the weapons.
Mm-hmm. And it does have platforming in it and like neat platform mechanics, but it pretty much all boils down to a double jump, and a float.
Mm-hmm.
And this game has that as well as a rolling mechanic and a bouncing mechanic and like, climbing, swinging, jumping, all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And I mean, to put a button on it, I guess, Galaxy really is the standout in the Mario series. And that's the fucking Mario series. Like, if any game is going to nail something at least once, it's that one.
Yeah.
And they did it one time. They just could not do it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I like the original idea for Bowser in Mario 3, where you have to make him pound through the ground.
Uh-huh.
But it was used in the final boss. Because you don't have combat mechanics, really. Yeah.
Also, you haven't played it, but the final boss in Mario 3D World is actually really good.
All right, okay. I will take your word for it on that. It's something I don't really hold against it, because most of them were not particularly difficult.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a big sticking point for me.
Yeah, to brush up elbows with the end of the game, but not talk about the end of the game yet.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about Dr. Lobato specifically. What was the point of that?
What?
Because they totally pull Zant, and he just gets switched out for Coach Oleander at the last minute.
Yeah.
Like, I wish they would have at least had like a level in his head or something. Because he has the assistant too, and also Shigor.
Yeah.
So he has 2 assistants. It felt like one of those 3 probably was originally supposed to have a level, and it got cut.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's something very weird about the use of that character just at all.
Which one?
Of Lobato.
Okay.
Because like he's introduced in a dream sequence and dismissed as though he was still in a dream sequence, like just with how like brief it is. And it's super weird because he's an interesting character, like from a design perspective, right? Like,
and just it's such a basic ass joke, but the idea that he's just a dentist,
right,
but he's performing lobotomies is kind of funny.
Yeah, and he's the one who introduces the whole like you sneeze out your brain thing, and he's kind of drives the plot, like his plot, to like take the brains of all the kids, which I guess is not really his plot. It was Oleander's plot the whole time.
Brains are also a good collectible.
Brains are a good collectible.
Forgot to mention that.
Yeah. Well, they get introduced really late.
But they're still fun to collect.
True. Yeah, but all of that, like, it adds up to so much nothing, because his, like, eventual demise is you climb a tower. Like, that's his level, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and I did like the tower, actually. I mean, I wasn't a fan of the rat enemies that explode, but I liked having, like, a platforming challenge, like, just, like, a straightforward, climb this tower. I thought that was cool.
No, it was, for sure, but it wasn't personal.
No,
like, it didn't feel like Lobato's level. It felt like a tower you climb.
It felt like a lobotomized brain. Not really.
Good one.
good save, me. But no, yeah, that just, yeah, like I said, just kind of like reeks of cut content to me.
Yeah.
Like there's something to that final ascent and confrontation that isn't there, because you get up there, you save the turtle for Shigor or whatever, and she helps you pull one over on Dr. Lovato, and then just like Sasha just defeats him in a cutscene.
Yeah,
like
they
you
shoot
don't
a beam at him.
You don't do anything to him at all.
Yeah,
it's really weird.
He's barely aware of your existence.
Yeah,
like in the whole game. It's super strange, and I think the fact that he takes the place of like the main bad guy, I guess in an effort to subvert it when Oleander like sort of takes over. But it doesn't do that particularly well either, because he's exposed before you even get to the asylum.
He's set up to be the villain as well.
Yeah. And it basically means that neither of them have a time to shine, really.
Yeah.
Except for Oleander in the last level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's where
yeah, it's like they had two different ideas for a villain, and we're like, let's just do both. And then it didn't work out.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much spot on.
Yeah, but I wanted to transition from this into talking about Double Fine as a developer.
Okay.
It
didn't work out.
Yeah. But because I feel like this is my favorite one of their games that I've played, and I think even this has what I think of in my mind as the Double Fine issue, where their games are usually really creative, have really great premises and like things we've talked about, but they start out really good, and like the first like half to 2/3 of the game is like really good, and then in the last third or in other places, they don't fall to unfinished pieces or anything, but they feel rushed, like they weren't given enough time or money to like make the full game. And but it's like a consistent thing with them.
Yeah. And it's like we watched the documentary on the making of Broken Age.
Yeah.
And you can see it in that game, but it also is given context and a justification. Like, the game was rushed. The game didn't have enough money.
Yeah, they did that second round of Kickstarter
Yeah,
backing,
so they split it into two halves. And even then, you can still see the difference, but it feels like it's more justified.
Yeah.
In Psychonauts, you don't have that context, so I don't know what happened behind the scenes. But at the same time, it does, like, just kind of tumble a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the whole last third of the game. It's just, I don't know, it's the last 2 or so levels.
Yeah, it's after Black Velvetopia. Right.
Is when it just feels like we had something here, but we replaced it with throwing a turtle. And it's like we had something here to maybe like ramp into the Meat Circus, but instead we're just gonna do a boss fight, throw you immediately into the hardest fucking level with the jankiest platforms in it, in the entire game, and just like drop that on you and be like, and then the game is over. Then nothing happens. You do a 3-phase boss fight, and then there's a big long cutscene. I don't know. It does seem to be a consistent issue with them, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, it's probably not surprising to hear me say that this is also my favorite Double Fine game, but yeah, it has a weakness, and I think that a lot of it is actually in story. I think that the character writing is really good. I think that the plot is not.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out the obligatory Saturday morning cartoon reference here, but like it really feels like a pitch for a cartoon.
I mean, it does have the guy who voices Invader Zim and Dag from the Angry Beavers as the main characters. So
the setup of the camp and everything, like it feels like a thing you could spin off an episodic week to week animated show from.
Yeah, Foster's Home for Psychic Friends.
Yeah, and it never quite gels into like a interesting story independently of all of like the cool concepts in it.
Yeah. And one thing that surprised me, because I was not expecting a Psychonauts 2. We've confirmed that it is a thing that is happening.
Yeah, I'm hoping the Microsoft buyout will eliminate the Double Fine problem.
And they just have enough
And they
money
have
to
enough
do it.
money, yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. But part of why I wasn't expecting the sequel was because I just forgot that this game totally ends on a cliffhanger. Where they're like, well, okay, I see the look you're giving me.
I don't think it's a cliffhanger, but it totally sets up for a sequel.
Yes. Yeah, because it gives you this inclination like, oh, Lily's dad is somebody important. And also, you're now going on a mission.
Yeah, you are officially a psychonaut.
Right. To go do the thing. And it's like, oh, like, I feel like I didn't expect it because, like, the first time I played this game, I was a kid and I didn't beat the game because the last level was really hard and I quit. And then I played it again as like a teen and did beat it, and that had already been years, so I just wrote off the possibility of there being a sequel at that point. But yeah, and it feels very rushed. Like the whole ending feels like, okay, like you did the thing, now you're a psychonaut, no ceremony at all. Here's a sweater, put it on.
Your dad showed up. That was teased early, but was not built up to at all.
Yeah. It's like your dad doesn't get talked about as much as the narrative weight that's put on him would justify. Like, you're like, oh, my dad doesn't like psychics. And they're like, anyway, cool, moving on. Throw this trash can at that thing.
They really set him up to be like a not good father. And then when he shows up, he's like totally cool, laid back, fun dad.
Yep.
Which is just not at all what you would have expected.
Right. I feel like part of it is like, Raz is a kid and you're supposed to think like through his eyes. It's like when you're like, can I have that lollipop? And your mom's like, no. You're like, I hate you.
Right.
I'll never talk to you
all
again.
I wanted was that lollipop. Just one lollipop.
But that's not even, because that's not how the game is set up. Like, you're not seeing things through Rasputin's eyes. He's a character, the main one, and you're following him, but it doesn't skew the interpretation of everything else. Yeah. But it does here for some reason.
Just while I'm thinking of it, I really love that Raz was raised like in the circus, because it raises the question, or it answers the question, if kids run away to the circus, where do kids in the circus run away to? Psychic summer camp.
Yeah, Whispering Rock, Psychic summer camp. I actually, to spin off of that, because I'm done harping on the story, I think it is not very good, but the writing is good enough that like I totally... Yeah, like before playing it this time, I didn't even notice.
Yeah, it's just like a standard video game plot. Like beat the bad guy.
Yeah.
Is basically what it boils down to.
Yeah, beat the 2 to 4 bad guys in this game. But no, I also like that it was explained that he grew up in a circus, because it also gives context to his ability to do shit, which is something. Platform. Yeah, which is something that just never gets explained. Like Mario's been around for 35 years and he just sort of like is a plumber.
It ties back into what I was saying on the first half, where like this is the kind of game that has those types of details that really like elevate a game, I think. Like there's context for like why characters do the things they do and why the things in the game world are the way they are, that not a lot of games do when you actually like, you know, take a magnifying glass to them, you know, like.
Yeah, I think that game mechanics as like a concept feel as though they should be, your disbelief is inherently suspended. where it's like, yeah, Nathan Drake is like I don't actually know what his fucking job is, but I guarantee you what it isn't is shooting a lot of people and jumping off of mountains. but that's what he's gonna do because that's what you signed up for when you bought the game, and you don't really take that into account. Like the game at no point stops and is like, Nathan, have you ever handled one of these before? And he's like, yeah, I was in Nam. Like that's not a thing that occurs. But this game, like, it introduces it's got all kinds of foreshadowing in it as well. Like they talk about the importance of different things, and they show the meat flower in Oleander's first level. There's like a little scene about it, and then it doesn't get brought up for like ever and ever until, well, it gets brought up a couple of times, but like in the same similar context. And I think that is all really good, really cool. I'm glad that it's there because it's part of what elevates this game above its peers.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of great seeds were planted, just not all of them got to grow.
Yes. It was
in this beautiful summer camp.
Oh no, I dropped my turpentine. Acetone.
I'm glad you remembered that, because that is definitely the best joke in the game.
Yeah, I think it might legitimately be up there. And also a good metaphor here. Somebody's trying to grow plants, and then the game goes up in flames. Anyway. But yeah, that's narrative, that's writing, that's bosses. What else we got?
We mentioned our favorite levels earlier, but I wanted to ask, like, which one you think is like the most creative spin, because I think each level kind of does its own like unique thing. I think the latter few are the best examples, like Black Velvetopia and Glorious Theater, but I was just wondering if there were any of those from the Asylum that you thought were like particularly great or interesting. Or
yeah, great levels. I think Milkman Theater and Black Velvetopia all stand out as being like good platformer levels. With of those, my favorite being Black Velvetopia, and then probably Milkman, and then the theater after that.
That surprises me. Like, I thought that the bowl mechanic would be something you'd fucking hate.
Its visual, of the level as a whole, made me look past a lot of that.
I'm glad.
Yeah, the fact that it was just so like captivating to be there. And that's actually similar with Milkman. There's a lot of stuff in Milkman that's kind of tedious as well, but it's just like a really interesting concept, and the characters are written in like a quirky way that makes it fun to play through. And then the theaters where the mechanics, I think, really took a dive for me, because I felt like there's a lot of sort of like the precarious platforming where you don't actually die, but you have to do a whole bunch of stuff again.
Yeah, I remember having trouble with that the first time I played it, but this time I managed to do it pretty easily, and it landed a lot better. I really don't think there should have been enemies. Like, all the enemies on the stage when you have it set to tragedy mode is awful.
Fuck that, yeah.
They shoot projectiles at you, and it's just like you're given a view that's like further away when you're on the stage, and it's just not... It doesn't mesh.
No, yeah, it just feels bad.
Yeah, but I really like how like condensed that level is. Like, I think it's really like I just feel like it would be really hard to design a level in that way that's got that much going on in such a small space. Like, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, totally agree. That was thematically probably one of my favorites. But the reason I mentioned those three in particular for great level and not Waterloo World is because I think Waterloo World is actually maybe the most original of them, but is kind of a chore.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially fetch quests the level.
Yeah, I think the basic concept is cool. Like, the idea of having you shrink down and engage in like a really in-depth tabletop strategy game, like as one of the pieces, is a cool one. Like, I feel like that has a lot of potential, but yeah, as you said, they kind of make it into a fetch questy thing Like there are parts of it that are good and other parts that are not.
Yeah. Like at the points where you have to just like get this thing, go over here, grow to a different size, go do that other thing, then walk back. It's like I get a little tired of it because there's not really a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't feel very engaging. It just feels like walking, and there's not really a whole lot of platforming to do outside of like getting on that dude's roof. Like
Yeah.
that involved platforming, but most of it takes place sort of on flat ground.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, it's real hit and miss. But I think the parts that it hits on are the thematic elements, and I like Fred Bonaparte as a character,
Yeah.
just as a thing.
It's weird when he takes the straitjacket off and he's got like really short,
Little
stubby
tiny
arms.
arms.
Yeah, because I imagined he had long ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's there as a joke, and I think it works.
Yeah, for sure. And I really loved the gag after you do all those levels and you put all the things that they gave you on you to make you look like Dr. Lobato to the assistant who doesn't have his glasses or whatever. That's a class. That feels like classic Tim Schafer. like the most like emblematic thing of like a thing he would put in a game.
Right. That's like the fortunately the game solves it for you, but that's your like old adventure game puzzle where you're like, okay, I have these items and I need to become like, you're like holding a cactus or something.
You have Gloria's trophy.
It's the trophy,
for
it's the claw
arm, and you put the painting over your face. And then you put the straitjacket on to be like the lab coat.
Right.
And yeah, that makes you look like a dentist with a claw hand. But while we're on the topic of Tim Schafer, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about just the 3D platformer genre kind of in general, and how this game has kind of influenced others that have come after it. Because I played A Hat in Time whenever that came out. It's been like 2 years or something now, or maybe more. But
I think it's been 2.
It's got one level in particular, which is the second one, which is the movie theater level, which pits you, has you pick sides between 2 directors, and you have to star in each of their movies, with each level is like a different movie, and you build up points for each one, and whoever ends up winning ends up being the boss, and the other one helps you. But a lot of that level has like, I feel like Psychonauts-esque like vignette, or not vignettes, but like little set piece moments and like dialogue parts. Like, it's kind of hard to describe. Like, I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about the legacy of this game and other games that Double Fine's put out, is like how they incorporate like narrative moments into the game, and like these little set pieces and moments with like lots of personality, and like you can see it crop up in other games.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely something here. Like, this game isn't as old as time itself or anything, but it is, like, it's getting up there. It's nearly 15 years old. And that is, I mean, that's impressive that, like, we can talk about it like this now. But it isn't so old that it has influenced the genre so much as it's influenced, like, specific games. Kind of like how we talked with some of like the Resident Evil 4, like how it sort of influenced survival horror into a new direction.
Yeah.
I don't think that Psychonauts did the same thing for 3D platformers, but like if you were developing a character-driven game and you wanted to read up on the classics, so to speak, it would be a complete disservice not to play this game.
Yeah.
Because this is a game that really is like, I mean, the whole concept of it, of going, which we weirdly have sort of talked around and tertiarily about because it's that core to the game. The concept of going into other people's heads and playing in levels that were designed to reflect their mental processes, like, is a unique one. And it's one that puts the characters of the game really at the forefront, more so than most platformers. And I'm sure there was something before it, but definitely not to this degree.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you just had that realization because I have it in my notes to specifically call out that I think that that's genius.
Mm-hmm.
Because it really it explain as we've been talking about, like, gives a justification for having weird and varied levels because each one is like inner reflection of like a person's psyche.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all completely varied and different, and each one is themed around a different mental illness for all the people who are in the asylum, and a lot is revealed about each character directly through the vaults when you find them, and also like indirectly just by like little details in the environment. Like there's a lot of good concepts going on there. Like it's just such a good idea for it fits particularly well in a platformer, but I think it could work even in a lot of other games. Just like on a base level, I think it works really well to like explore characters.
Yeah, it would work pretty well if like I don't know, let's just say like an RPG or something.
Well,
right?
if you could do it, think about it with like Zelda, and you did like each dungeon is inside a person's head. Like it would map equally well to something like that.
100%. But my whole, this is just a hypothetical I'm coming up with about like an RPG where you were to like each person like creates sort of like their own zone that you could go in and out of, and like in a certain number of days, whatever, and then steal their treasure.
Okay. You were really trying to tiptoe around.
Yeah. Persona 5 and the Persona series as like a generality is something that, despite being made on another continent, most likely had some inspiration taken from this game as well.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I don't know how the older games played. Maybe this game cribbed a little bit from them. But I don't know if it's always been as personal as it is in Persona 5.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
But yeah, it's 100%, you're correct. It maps really well onto a lot of things when you want level differentiation. Like if you look back at the SNES era, which I do frequently because I'm very nostalgic for that era, every game on it, for some reason, had like there's like a dinosaur area and like a lava area, one in space, and one that probably had robots that may or may not have been the same one as the space one. And that approach was to give variety. But if it was never given context in a way that made any goddamn sense.
Right.
Like sometimes it had something, but most of the time it was just like, we wanted to do dinosaurs, so here we are. And I mean, there's a validity in that, like just being like, here's our base mechanics, here's the worlds you're going to play and go. Like Mario still does that.
Yeah. But
giving it context like this goes such a long way of making that make sense.
Yeah.
And this game is extremely varied because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm firmly in the camp that, as I said, I think early in the first half, like I really appreciate that stuff. Not everybody does, but like that's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
Like this game, I think on a base level, does a lot of the stuff that I really care about in games. So
yeah, I think
we want to talk about that final level.
Let's talk about the Meat Circus. So I was actually leaving the house as you were starting the Meat Circus level, and I remember that just like, because you knew basically, aside from what you played before, you didn't know how this game went generally, and apparently we're unaware of the infamy of this last level.
Never heard anyone talk about it ever.
Yeah, so the last thing that I said before I walked out the door was just like, remember the important thing is to have fun. But then, my impression is that you actually didn't struggle with it very much.
I mean, I feel like there's probably just a difference in definition of struggling with a thing between you and me. But I mean, it was more difficult than the rest of the game, but I didn't think it's because it was super hard so much as that it did what I think is a final level / boss sin of like completely changing up the kind of challenge that you're faced with from the rest of the game.
Right.
Because it was a lot more like everything's like timed. There's a lot of timed, tight platforming challenges, which is just like not what the game has been about at all.
Right.
It's been a lot more like slow paced, explore-y around like more densely packed areas, and this is like here's a linear timed platforming challenge. It's the basic, not like an escort mission, but like protect that character from getting killed. Like annoying things that feel kind of tacked on.
Yeah. And honestly, like, there's a point, I think, where if they had just... Because Oleander has, like, or Little Ollie, as he's called, has, like, a health bar throughout the whole first part of the mission. And the second part is not as bad. You do, like, a little grindy thing, and then do some more platforming, and then you're at the boss. And that's all pretty bog standard and okay. For me, it's the first part, and then it's the boss fight, and those are the parts that really, like, fuck with me. But if they just replaced his health bar with a timer, I feel like I would have been less stressed out by it.
Yeah, it's thankfully it resets every time you save him, like you get through each section. But no, yeah, that part's super annoying, results in, like, trial and error.
And suffers really badly from there aren't enough lines of dialogue for the NPCs in the game.
And the rail grindy part after it, which you said was fine, felt really weird to me. It was like the whole rail grinding thing felt like another one of those things that they included and then just didn't do anything with.
Right.
And they were like, gotta throw it in here at the end. And it's like a little rail grindy section for no reason.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, people use the phrase, like, when something is, like, set and has only one outcome, they refer to it as being on rails.
Yep.
But that is not at all the case here. Because you've got to be, like, bouncing all over the place. But I felt like that was maybe not, like, an appropriate end to that particular mechanic, but it was, like, a step up that was along the lines of what it was going for.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you have an issue? Because this is the kind of detail that I would not remember from like 10 years ago. Jumping between rails. Did you find that incredibly difficult?
No.
Okay.
I didn't think it was difficult. It did feel like kind of sluggish or slow maybe, but it wasn't hard to do.
Okay. I think because I played it on the PS4.
Yeah.
I think the PS4 port might just be real bad.
I wasn't going to say anything while you were playing it, but I know it looked worse, like noticeably worse, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was a sign that it's a bad port.
Yeah, I think it's a bad port, guys.
Maybe that's why you had trouble with the telekinesis.
Also very possible. I think there was some kind of like lack of responsiveness in the controls, and also it dropped a lot of frames. So doing like the side jump from one rail to another was very hard to execute on for some reason.
Yeah. I recommend the PC port, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, PC or the original PS2 or Xbox versions.
Or the Steam version, I guess, because it released for PC initially. So
yeah,
but yeah, and then the boss fight itself, I didn't think was bad. A little bit wonky to like figure out what to do, but the hardest part I thought was after that, where you have to chase Raz's dad with the rising water.
That is the hardest part. The third part, like the final boss, would have been the hardest part if it wasn't a carbon copy of the first part, because every attack he does just fucking kills you.
Yeah.
Well, not really, but does like half of your life. It's kind of absurd, but you know what to do at that point. You're just like, okay, I shield this, I back up, I shield that, I hit him with the thing.
Right.
But yeah, chasing the dad, don't go chasing dads.
Yeah, and also, once again, wasn't that bad except for the part at the end where you have to like go up around the nets
with
or whatever the fuck they are.
Shit.
And it's like, what is the intended thing to do there?
I think
because what I had to do, this is the only thing I could figure out, and it fucking sucked, was I'd climb up it to like the top corner-ish part and then kind of hop to where I was on top of it. and then jump off and glide so I can make it to the next one.
You stood on top of
Yeah,
the gate? Oh my god.
I couldn't jump to the next one
Right.
without doing that.
Yeah, and if
What
you
do
fall,
you do?
you just die.
What do you do?
As far as I know.
Because you can't jump sideways.
Right. That's what's fucked up about it, is because other games have done that sort of like 3D rotational before, but they just change the axis of your movement.
Yeah.
This game doesn't do that. What I do is I jump off of it completely, double jump, and then float to the next one. That's really hard.
Yeah, it's wonky to double jump off of a thing.
Yes. Because you have to input the double jump like in the first like 30 frames, or else you just free fall to your death.
So like I just kind of like hopped up on top of the little thin ledge. It was so frustrating.
Yeah, that sucks real bad. Also, just want to shout out in the first part of the level again, because we kind of bypassed it. The sword thrower guy and the target thing, he just takes so long, and it's so frustrating when you have to do that part again.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. So we're at least on the same page, I think. I was probably more frustrated.
Yeah. Like I feel like you watching me do that, you would think I had like godly patience.
Yes, nerves of steel.
Yeah, compared to what you like to put up with.
Which is not that.
Right. But yeah, definitely messy.
Messy.
Yeah, to put it positively.
Yeah. The design of the enemies was cool in that area.
Yeah.
That's my one positive.
Yeah.
I like the meat grinders that grinded out bunny zombies.
It was a really weird aesthetic choice. The Meat Circus, as you could tell. I almost kind of wish they would have leaned into it more and made it more like horror-ish. Like, because fleshy meat grinding, like it's just like that's disturbing stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe they could have leaned into that.
I want to like go into final thoughts here real soon, but I do want to expand a little bit on that because
it kind of ends up falling flat, I think.
I agree. I think that it's almost iconic to the game to some extent. Like the last level's the Meat Circus. It's this really hard platforming level where you die a whole bunch of times and it sounds horrifying, but actually playing it, it's just tedious more than anything. I think this game has a weird tone in regards specifically to violence, and it's very weird to me, like, because there's an element of like as we talked about, your standard video game plot, good versus evil, bad guys trying to take brains out of kids, put them in a tank, blow up the world, and that's bad.
Yeah.
Everyone agrees. Nothing good about that. But then every other time that what's the character's name? Maloof? I
don't remember the kid's name.
Yeah, it was like a little short kid who got picked on.
Oh, the one with the blue skin.
And then eventually, he gets guessed later. Okay. But the kid picking on him gets, he becomes like a murderer. Like, there's the other kid with the accent and the big tall hat who's like the Rolf character of this game. Who at one point is like, has this whole line of dialogue where he's just like, we could do the half deadly Nelson, and he's like, what's half about it? He's like, it's only half chance of dying. He's like, and the other half, he's like, spend rest of short life wishing for death. And like Raz is not at all like razzled by this.
Yeah,
he just lets it go.
Yeah, the other kid who's the first one to get his brain stolen.
Talks about blowing up heads.
Yeah, like accidentally exploding someone's head. And I mean, yeah, that is a humorous thing. But, also that makes him just a murderer.
Yeah, and I don't even mean to abstract it that far. It's more that it's played for laughs, and I agree that it should be, and that is like the intent, and everything works out, except all the characters' reactions to it are always of amusement. Like, Raz is very amused by killing the lungfish, which is weird, but I mean, I guess he knows that they aren't real. There's just kind of like a sick satisfaction I feel like it takes in violence.
That one I think is more justified because you're dropped in as like Godzilla.
True.
You know, it's just kind of set up that way.
Mm-hmm. Nobody's gonna shoot me when I go through there. Well, maybe one guy.
And everyone refers to you as Goggalore. So, you know,
he's like, oh, well, I can get away with this.
Yeah, I gotta play the part.
Yeah. But all of that to say, because I like all of that, and I think it does a good job at establishing itself. I don't think they could have pulled off horror in a way that was like good.
I feel like they could have done something creepier though. Like I feel like they could have done something.
That's fair.
But yeah, one last thing just popped into my head. The last level is a mix of your consciousness and Coach Oleander's. And I think that's a really cool idea that I would like to see played with in the sequel.
Yeah.
Like, at least one level that's like a mix of two people's minds would be cool to see.
I agree. And hopefully they don't have to get as contrived as putting both of them inside of a tank.
Right, yeah.
To get it to work. Like, there's got to be some other way around that.
Like twins or something?
Yeah, great idea. That actually was...
Make it happen.
Yeah,
like, can we get to Double Fine headquarters?
All right. Do we have? Ooh. Hold on. This one is ripe. It's like final thoughts. It's a game about psychics. There's something in here, but I cannot place it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
That's. Do we have final thoughts? Thoughts just works well enough this time.
Do we have collective or something about the collective unconscious?
Do we have collective thoughts?
I think I said it earlier. I think this is one of the most underrated or underplayed games of its time. I don't know if other people had the same problem I did where they thought it was Xbox exclusive for no reason. I think this holds up pretty well. It's on Steam. If for some reason you listen to this and haven't played it, absolutely check it out. It as I was getting at, it really gets into a lot of the kinds of things I really appreciate in games. There's the theming and the tone and the context and like contextualization of like what everyone does and the way things are the way they are in the game. It's all really great, well considered. It's funny. As we said, its biggest fault is that it needed some more time in the oven. It kind of feels rushed in the last third-ish of the game. But there's some great stuff in there. Like, people talk a lot about a quick YouTube search will reveal many a video on the Milkman Conspiracy and Black Velvetopia seem to be the standout favorites. And it's for a reason. There's a lot of great stuff in here, and more people should play this.
Yeah. I feel like through this whole thing, and not to make it sound like you wasted your time, I don't think that we really went very much against the grain as far as popular opinion of this game goes. Mm-hmm. It's a good ass game, and I think it deserves to be celebrated. I think I agree with the majority of what you said. I remember a point when I would like actually like just straight up advertise for this game because I was just upset that more people hadn't played it yet. And I would like go online, post, be like, "Hey, Psychonauts is $1.99 right now. Like, I'll just buy it for you if you haven't played it yet." And I legitimately think like maybe one person ever like took me up on that. Something about this game is just like off-putting to some people.
We never talked about the aesthetic.
That is true.
Weirdly.
It's got a very...
It's got like a claymation look.
It does, and it has
it's...
like a Tim Burton sort of like sensibility to it.
I feel like, yes, totally in the Asylum, but I think earlier parts of the game, it reminds me more of like James and the Giant Peach, or like more like Coraline, like stuff that's a little bit more colorful, and kind of like a little bit of a weirder tone.
Yeah.
But it's weird because it's like a PS2 era game and it doesn't quite come off that way, so it ends up looking a little bit weird.
Yeah, it's got a chunky sort of like bizarro way of displaying everything.
And some of the characters are a little bit too weird looking, I think.
Bobby Zilch's teeth and gums.
Yeah. Like, I like that they went so weird, but some of them are too far.
Yeah. There's a character, and I don't even remember, I think it may have been Bobby, who at one point, like, because they made him so tall and lanky, that, like, his elbows sort of diminish into nothing when shown from a certain angle.
Yeah, the limbs are weird. Like, Raz's arms feel like they're almost like they made a modeling error, and they get too small to where they connect to his shoulders.
Yeah, they like pinch together like a rag doll.
Yeah, it's very weird looking.
It's super strange. So those are my final thoughts.
Yeah, sorry to cut those off there.
No, that is fine. It is important, and I did want to mention that and forgot.
Yeah,
so.
I think it gels, though, into something that looks good.
It does. I think with the tone and setting of the game, the aesthetic is appropriate. I just think that maybe it might be what keeps some people away from it.
I think that's totally legit. I think it would be, like, some people would just find it ugly.
Yeah. But they should. They should play it, particularly if their interest lies in writing and character development, because maybe not development so much, but like character exploration.
Yeah.
Because that's what this game really does well. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about Death Stranding. The Kojima's hotly anticipated and now kind of hotly debated game. This episode...
Who would have seen that coming?
I know, right? It's almost like he made PT and Metal Gear Solid 5 in the last 5 years.
Almost.
So I guess we're kind of letting that die down a little bit because we're going to be releasing it in December. And well, we'll see. We'll see how everything pans out with that.
Yeah, I've played the first several hours of it and still don't know how I feel about it. So
that's fair. I'm like 12 hours in and think that it is spoilers. I'll talk about it later. Until that time, when I will talk about it, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com. There you can find our Twitter, our email if you want to contact us, links to all of our old episodes, including an episode on Broken Age from this game's developer, or Metal Gear Solid 1 from Death Stranding developer. Look at how topical we're being. Check out all of the NoClip Pocket episodes that we've released. I've been really happy with that series as of late.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten better.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Telepathically smash that like button.
Use a palm bomb on the subscribe button.
You're getting a phone call.
Pete, you're on the air.
What up, dick neck? Are you guys doing your podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me get a clip. I want a clip of me in the show.
Oh, well, you're being recorded right now.
What up, world? Okay. Well, I'll let you guys get back to it. I just wanted to, I guess, just annoy you. So there's no real purpose to my phone call. I'm gonna go sit here and play Demon Souls until my inevitable.
I hope you enjoy it.
I am extremely excited. I'm sure it's been an interesting talk. All right, ta-ta.